Chapter 121. Necromancer Virus. When the agent saw Lucas and the others, he saw a sliver of hope. And with whatever little energy he had left, he made a dash towards Lucas and the others. Thud. Unfortunately, he tripped and fell head first onto the ground. The horde of men and women behind him growled and got into a frenzy. One man with wounds all over his face, and blood smudged on it, leaped and landed on top of the agent. Lucas frowned when he saw what happened next. The man took a bite out of the agent's neck. Blood spurted out of the wound. After the man on top of him munched and swallowed, he came at the agent's neck again. The agent tried to stop him and raised his arm. His heart sank when he struggled to do so. The other men and women in the horde had caught up and grabbed onto his hands, tearing the skin and flesh off them with their teeth. "What the hell?" Rex said. He immediately activated his rock ability, getting ready in case the horde of men and women would dare to come close. The other team members were also just as perturbed, but they also got ready for battle. Most likely it's someone with the necromancer ability. The virus affects the dead and makes them hunger for flesh, which in turn infects those that were killed by the dead. The only way to stop it is to kill the wielder with the ability, Sherry said. Just as she was saying this, the horde was done with the agent. They turned their attention to Lucas and the others. Eerily enough, the agent, who was now drenched in his own blood, got up from the ground. His eyes were now soulless. His tongue licked his lips. There was only hunger for flesh and blood in his mind. Growl. The agent gave out a loud growl and ran towards Lucas and the others. Wham! Lucas didn't waste any time and unleashed lightning strikes at the horde of men and women. It caught a dozen of them, causing them to explode into a mist of red. Riley and the others also joined in. These men and women were already dead, and there was no way to salvage them. Riley unleashed his lightning strike. Rex, using his spiky rock whip, ripped these undead into halves. Using her poison net, Emma burnt and dissolved them into a puddle of red liquid mixed with flesh, blood, and tissue. Harrianto also used his plasma pulse to decimate these undead men and women. Ice extended out onto the remaining men and women, freezing their legs, trapping them within the ice. Lucas then hurled icicles at the men and women. The icicles rained upon them from above, plunging through the head and into the body of these undead. Soon there was only silence. What was in front of Lucas and the others looked like a scene from hell. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points 2800/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 5. Bleh. Emma tried her best to contain herself. All of them felt nausea after the fact. A bad feeling rose from within as they were more used to killing demonic beasts and other awakened. Never before did they have to deal with undead, who a moment before were still normal human beings. However, they knew they had to do it for their own survival. Even Sherry felt herself wanting to puke after what happened. Damn the Shadow Lotus! Rex cursed out loud as he couldn't contain his anger at them. The Shadow Lotus were treating the lives of others like they didn't matter. Where do we find the person with the SSS-level necromancer virus ability? Emma asked. The city was now in chaos and it wouldn't be easy to do so. Sherry and the others frowned as they knew Emma was right, but it had to be done as soon as possible before more innocent people fell prey to it. Wait, I remember that there was an SSS level awakened with tracking ability. Maybe he could help, Harrianto said. They were chased by the security forces and found out that they were hiding in Dr. Yui's safe house previously. That awakened might be able to help. Someone from the security force might know? Riley asked. It sounded like a plan, and they were almost ready to get to the headquarters of the security force. However, Lucas interjected and said, "We might have to split. Some of us should go and get the governor." If this was done by the Shadow Lotus, they would be going to the governor for the activation device to wake up the first awakened. And if we are too late to prevent it, we will have to go to where the first awakened for the West Battle Administration area is hibernating. After what had happened in the South Battle Administration area, Lucas knew what they were after making it possible for him to guess their plan of action. Split into 2 teams? Rex asked. Let me try and get to the headquarters of the security forces, Lucas said. If the team was split into 2, those who met with the Shadow Lotus might be too weak to fight against the Shadow Lotus if Lucas wasn't with them. The same thing might be true vice versa. It would be better if he operated on his own to kill off the person behind the Necromancer virus. And after he was done, he could then quickly meet up with the team. Everyone frowned as they were worried for Lucas if he went alone. But they also understood his intention. Finally, Riley made the decision and said, Lucas shall make his way to the headquarters of the security force. We shall go and get the governor. He walked over to Lucas, placed his hand on Lucas's back and said, Remember, don't do anything rash. And if you feel it's too dangerous, come meet up with us. Lucas nodded and he got moving. He picked up his phone, looked at where the headquarters of the security force were. Fortunately, it was not too far away, serving the rich residents in the surrounding area. When he was done, he smashed the window of an abandoned car, got into it, and started to make his way there. Riley and the others got into the armored car and headed toward the governor's residence. Chapter 122. Paul. Forlin, remember how you used to mock me, saying how useless I was with my SSS level ability? Who is the useless one now? Huh. Hassan shouted. In front of him was another old man, well-dressed with sleek hair and wearing an expensive watch and rings on his hands. The old man Forlin stammered, trying to say something, but he couldn't. His wife and grandson were snarling, their teeth covered with blood, all at him, trying to take a bite out of him. Hassan had ordered them not to do so while he smirked at Forlin. Forlin single-handedly changed the fate of his life, declaring his ability unworthy of use, condemning him to struggle the whole of his life. The Shadow Lotus was the one to recognize his greatness and allowed him to use it to the fullest, displaying what he was capable of to the world. As for Forlin, it was payback time. After having enough fun, and seeing that Forlin was too shocked to even refute him, Hassan decided that it was time. He glanced over to Forlin's wife and grandson, now under the control of his Necromancer virus. They growled and couldn't wait to lunge at Forlin. No! Wake up! Forlin shouted in despair. But it didn't do much. His wife ripped his cheek out while his grandson munched on his fingers. All over the city, similar tragic scenes were happening. Initially, awakened teams were activated but were overwhelmed by the undead and stopped by the Shadow Lotus. When the number of undead got big enough, the Shadow Lotus then left Hassan on his own as they had other things to do. Thud. Lucas stepped onto the pedal when some men and women infected by the Necromancer virus came at his car. It knocked them away and one of them landed onto the hood of the car. But before the man on the hood could try and crawl towards him, Lucas used his Shadow Wielder ability and flung the man off the hood. Stop! Or we will open fire. The security forces had created a barrier in front of the headquarters. Lucas got out of the car and ignored them. Hordes of men and women came at him again. Using his ice ability, he froze most of them with the ice as it extended outwards. Icicles then shot at these men and women. Bladder. The ice was drenched in red the next moment. When the remaining men and women lunged at him, Lucas raised his hands and unleashed a torrent of lightning strikes at them, pulverizing them into a mist of red. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points, 3,400/40,000. Host level, 6. Current abilities, 5. What in the world? Did you see that? Quick! Let him stay with us. Seeing what Lucas did, the security forces changed their mind immediately. They would be safer with Lucas on their side. The awakened teams they had sent out were now uncontactable. Even the soldiers guarding the wall were also busy. Lucas didn't wait for them to open the barrier and he leaped through it. After he landed, he glanced at one of the security force officers and asked, "Does anyone know someone with SSS level tracking ability?" What? The security force officer was perturbed by his question. Why would anyone be concerned with that at a time like this? I need to track down the person who is causing what's happening with his SSS-level necromancer virus ability. Lucas explained his intention. A security force officer raised his hand and shouted, I know someone who has the SSS-level tracking ability. Lucas turned over and glanced at the security force officer who raised his hand. He is on the 5th floor, investigator office, the security officer said. Lucas nodded at him and he immediately went into the headquarters. Paul rubbed his knees as he still felt the pain from the bullet wound. He cursed himself for his decision to try and get the $5 million reward with Peter and Jane. But he was glad that he could be in the headquarters now as an investigation officer, due to his success at finding where Lucas and Dr. Uva were. With the chaos that was happening out there, he knew that he might not survive with his ability. Just as he sat back, ready to drink a mouthful of coffee from his coffee mug, the door of the investigation office was blown apart. He spilled the coffee all over his uniform when he sensed who it was. Paul could never forget Lucas's face. Young, handsome, and most of all ruthless. Firing 2 shots at his knees without hesitation, not giving him any chance. Now his nightmare was here, hopefully not for him. Paul's heart sank when he heard Lucas's voice. You over there. Lucas pointed at Paul and said, I need your tracking ability to stop the necromancer virus from spreading. Paul waved his hands and said, No, I don't think I can help. But Lucas ignored him. He walked over and held onto the uniform of Paul and yanked him out of his seat. Paul tried to break free but couldn't. Lucas's strength was too strong for him. All he could see next was the floor streaming by quickly as Lucas ran as fast as he could out of the headquarters. Put me down. I need to be upright to sense where he is. Lucas threw him into the seat beside the driver's seat and held him in place with his shadow wielder ability. After he got into the driver's seat, he started the engine. Paul's body started to engulf in a red glow. Imagery began to come into his mind. There were scenes of men and women biting at each other. And not far away, an old man stood and looked at what was happening with a smile. The old man must have been the culprit, Paul thought. Over there. Paul pointed in the direction to the city's central square. The man is over there? Lucas asked. I wouldn't know for sure. My ability can only track the target's presence in reverse chronology until we get to where he was. Lucas then stepped on the pedal and drove towards the central square. Meanwhile, Riley and the others stepped out of the armored car. The governor's residence wasn't too far away, but it was swarmed with undead trying to get over the high fence. They would have to figure out a way to get into the governor's residence safely and as fast as they could, before the Shadow Lotus got what they wanted. Growl. Suddenly the undead men and women growled and went into a frenzy. Chapter 123. Governor. A guard behind the fence of the governor's residence got too nervous, tripped himself and fell to the ground. The hordes of undead men and women near him tried to grab onto him. Instinctively, the guard kicked at the hands that were coming at him, trying to fend them off. It was a mistake as his leg got caught by the numerous hands and they pulled him towards the fence. Help me, the guard shouted in horror. He turned over to his colleague with a pleading look. None of them moved. They glanced at each other, not knowing what to do. Hey, and remember how I helped out with your mother's medical bills earlier? Please help me break free. The guard pleaded with tears rolling down his eyes. But his colleagues stood where they were, and raised her rifle and aimed at the guard. Sorry, but we have to end you before you turn into one of them. Bang. She didn't wait for a moment before she pulled the trigger. The guard stopped moving and the hordes of men and women took bites from his body. And when they were done, they let go of the guard. And the other guards felt a sense of relief when they saw the frenzy calm down a bit. But it wasn't over. The guard who and presumed she had shot dead started twitching his body. A low growl came out from the guard's throat. Snap. The guard lunged at Anne and took a bite at her neck, ripping off a chunk of flesh from it. The smell of blood caused the horde of undead men and women to gather around trying to get through the fence. Meanwhile, the commotion of what was happening gave Riley and the others time to get their armored car closer to the fence. When the timing was right, they got out of the armored car to the protest of Peter Lim. "You can't leave me here," he said, not even daring to shout, afraid of catching the attention of the horde. Riley and the others gave him a smirk and ignored him. "Lie low and pray that you are still alive when we return," Sherry said and used her ability on him. In an instant, Peter Lim stopped moving and lay onto the armored car's floorboard. She then joined the rest of the team and got onto the top of the armored car. "Try and leap over the fence on the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3, Riley said. When he counted to 3, they leaped from the top of the car over the fence of the governor's residence. With their strength as awakened, it wasn't impossible for them to do so. Even Margaret was able to leap through the fence. When they landed, the guards were already in a mess, and had in turn become one of those infected with the necromancer virus. She bit and killed several of the guards, and now the guards were fending off those infected. "Rex, stay at the back and cover us. Margaret, stay in the middle with Sherry." Riley gave out instructions for their positions and they quickly moved into place. He and Emma led the front, rushing towards the main building of the governor's residence. "Stop right there. Who are you?" Staff inside the governor's residence shouted and raised their weapons when they saw Riley and the others approaching. Riley stopped and glanced over at Sherry. Sherry took the cue and walked towards the door with her ID. "You are." The staff guarding at the door was shocked when they saw Sherry's title, assistant to the leader. She was someone they'd never thought they would ever meet. Her position was so many levels higher than the governor's. They quickly changed their attitude and let Riley and the others into the governor's residence. "Where is the governor?" Sherry didn't waste any time and asked the first thing when they got into the residence. One of the staff pointed at an office on the 3rd floor. Riley and the others quickly ran up the flight of stairs, hoping that they weren't late. "Governor, it's me, assistant to the leader." Sherry introduced herself and knocked on the office's door. She waited for a few moments, but there wasn't any reply. She shook her head and took a step back. Using her leg, she gave a solid frontal kick at the door lock. Thud! The impact from her kick shattered the door lock and the door swung inwards with force, slamming onto the wall, giving out a loud thud. Riley and Emma rushed in with their abilities ready for action. They saw the stationery on the governor's desk shaking. Riley lowered his body and took a peek. The governor was cowering under his desk. His frantic shaking from the fear had caused the stationery to be doing the same. Shaking his head, Riley walked over and lifted the desk with his hands. "Get out of here. Let me go." The governor mumbled to himself, covering his head with his hands. Riley and the rest of the team frowned. Their governor for the South Battle Administration area didn't go down like a coward. He had tried to coordinate the city's defense until the last minute when the Shadow Lotus got him. A deep sense of despise rose from within. Peter Lim, with his corruption, had allowed such an inept person to rise to the top in the West Battle Administration area. Slap. Sherry gave the governor a loud slap, making his head spin to the side. "I've got no time for you. Tell me, where is the activation device for the first awakened hibernation?" "Activation device?" the governor asked. His cheek was swollen from Sherry's slap and he could feel it burning with pain. "The briefcase you were supposed to guard with your life when you were sworn in." Sherry got closer and stared at him. "That briefcase is in the safe over there." The governor pointed to a safe in the corner of the office. Sherry gestured for him to open it. The governor scurried over to the safe and placed his palm onto the unlock panel. "Arg! Help!" Screams could be heard from outside the office. Chapter 124. Central Square. Rex walked out of the office and had a look. One of the staff was running towards him and turning his head to look behind. Men and women with soulless eyes and wounds got up from the stairs and appeared. They gave out a low growl and ran after the staff. "Help me!" the staff cried out. "We don't have much time," Rex shouted into the office. He conjured his spiky rock whip in his hand and lashed it in the direction of the staff. The staff's mouth opened wide when he saw the spiky rock whip coming at him. He closed his eyes, preparing for the worst. Splatter. A mushy splattering sound could be heard behind. The staff opened his eyes and glanced back. Rex's spiky rock whip had ripped through the undead man coming at him from behind. "What are you waiting for, run?" Rex shouted, and he drew back the spiky rock whip. The staff sprinted as fast as he could towards Rex. Growl. The remaining horde of men and women gave out a loud growl and came at Rex. Rex whipped his spiky rock whip at them, ripping a few of them apart. Bam! Haryanto, who had come out of the office, blasted a plasma pulse. His plasma pulse hit the remaining infected men and women, pulverizing them into bits of flesh and tissue. Beep! Inside the office, the safe gave out a beep and the door was unlocked. The governor took out the briefcase and handed it over to Sherry. "Can you let me go now?" the governor pleaded. Sherry shrugged and said, "I can let you go if I chop off your hands. There is someone out there after your hands to authenticate the activation device with them." "What? No." It didn't sound like a nice proposition to the governor, so he knew he had no other choice but to go with Sherry. When they got out of the office, the corridor leading to the office was now filled with hordes of men and women. Emma quickly used her ability and unleashed a net made of poison at the horde. The net burnt and dissolved its way through the mass of men and women. But to their horror, more of the infected men and women came up the stairs. "Where do we go now?" Rex turned over and asked. Riley looked at the surroundings and saw that the other end of the corridor was a window. "We will have to jump from here," Riley said. They nodded and slowly walked backwards, facing the hordes of men and women at the front, unleashing their abilities as they got closer to the window. "What about me? I can't take the drop from so high," the governor protested. "Don't worry. We have someone to heal you," Riley shrugged and said. Before the governor could plead again, Sherry leaped out of the window holding onto the governor. Crack. When she landed, she could hear the governor's bone cracking from the impact. Wham! Riley unleashed his lightning strike at the group of infected men coming at Sherry. He leaped from the third floor and joined Sherry on the ground. Soon the others joined them. Haryanto, being the last one, used his plasma pulse, shot at the ceiling of the corridor before jumping. The ceiling of the corridor came crumbling down and blocked the corridor, making it a dead end for the horde of men and women. Central Square. The square was an open area with tall buildings surrounding it. It was the busiest area in the city where everyone shopped and dined. There were billboards with fanciful advertisements playing with attractive jingles. All around them now, however, were men and women giving out guttural growls instead. They wandered around aimlessly, sniffing the air on and off for fresh meat to devour. Lucas sat inside the car with Paul, a distance away from the central square. "What do you need to do next?" Lucas asked. I need to get to the center of the square and use my ability there, as that's where the old man appeared previously." "Center of the square?" Lucas frowned when he heard Paul. That would mean that he has to protect Paul from the hundreds of men and women wandering in the square. Lucas thought for a moment and summoned the system's information panel in his mind. Ding! Current slaughter points, 3,400/40,000. Host level, 6. Current abilities, 5. Please select new ability. 1. SS level fire ability. 2. SSS level gravity ability. 3. S level absolute disguise ability. 4. S-level untraceable presence. Lucas saw the selections and pondered. The S-level absolute disguise ability and untraceable presence didn't look appealing to him. Same for the fire ability. He thought about the SSS level gravity ability and more information about it appeared in his mind. SSS level gravity ability allows host to double or have the gravity within a radius of 65 feet. Usage of this ability will utilize the energy of the host. Currently, host would be able to sustain the ability for 10 minutes. Add this as new ability? Y/N. Lucas read the effect of the ability and he thought it was great. With the increased gravity, enemies would have difficulties in their movements. And if he upgraded the ability later on, it might begin to be devastating if the amount of gravity increase would be more than double. With this thought in mind, Lucas thought yes in his mind. He felt another gust of energy entering his body at the very next moment. Imagery and knowledge about using the gravity ability entered his mind. However, he wasn't done yet. He still had enough slaughter points to upgrade his summoner ability. Upgrade SSS level summoner ability to Adept. Lucas thought silently. A familiar sound erupted in his mind the next moment. Ding! Congratulations, host! SSS level summoner upgraded to Adept level of mastery. After having a new ability and upgrading his summoner ability, Lucas felt that he was ready. Let's go! He glanced over to Paul and said, Are you sure? How do we get to the center of the square? There are so many of them. Paul wasn't sure what Lucas's plan was. Lucas shrugged and said, We jump. He stepped out of the car, held on to Paul. After that, he activated his SSS level gravity ability, reducing the gravity in the effective radius by half. Lucas stepped onto the ground and leaped with all his strength. Boom! He and Paul shot into the air like a bullet. Chapter 125. Forlin. Thud. Lucas landed midway near the center of the square, crushing a group of the undead men and women. Their bones cracked and fractured from the impact. The other undead men and women standing near where he landed turned around and ran towards him. Plop. However, when they took a few steps and got near Lucas, the gravity surrounding him doubled. This caused some of them to fall to the ground. Those that didn't had difficulty moving. The next moment, Lucas abruptly changed the gravity surrounding him to half of what's normal and kicked the ground hard. Whoosh! The ground cracked as he leaped up into the air towards the center of the square. Lucas pointed his hands towards the ground as he descended. Flickers of lightning appeared and lightning strikes shot at the horde of undead men and women. Boom! The lightning strikes, upon hitting the ground, caused an explosion, decimating the group of undead men and women. When Lucas landed, he placed his hands on the ground. A circular ice wall rose from the ground, which surrounded him and Paul. After he was done, Lucas glanced over at Paul and said, Do your thing and track down the man. Paul didn't waste any time, and a red glow engulfed his body when he activated his ability. Meanwhile, Lucas unleashed pillars of lightning strikes from the air at the undead men and women coming towards the ice wall. Wham! The pillars of lightning struck down on them and instantly ripped them apart. However, it didn't stop the other undead men and women. The blood in the air made them more excited. All of them rushed towards the center of the square. Growl. A loud growl came from one of the billboards, still displaying some cosmetics advertisement. A man dressed in full armor like an awakened emerged from the billboard. What was different were his soulless eyes like the undead and the wounds he had on his neck. He swiped his hand across and a wind blade shot out from it. The undead men and women in front of him were cut in half, opening up a path for him. With the path cleared, the awakened man ran towards Lucas. When he got near the ice wall, he crossed his hands and swung them downwards, unleashing wind blades in the form of an X. Crack. The wind blades sliced through the ice wall and Lucas had to quickly pull Paul to his side. Paul could feel the gust of wind brushing past him as the wind blades sliced strands of hair from his head. The undead awakened man pulled back his fist and punched at Lucas next. Two twirling winds like tornadoes shot towards Lucas. Boom! Lucas gave punches at the twirling winds and his punches gave out loud booming sounds as they broke the air. Airwaves from his punches collided with the twirling winds and they dissipated from the collision. Growl. The hordes of men and women came rushing in from the opening the undead awakened had created. Lucas raised his hands and unleashed lightning strikes at them. Splatter. The lightning strikes hit the oncoming horde and their bodies exploded into smithereens from the impact. Blood and flesh then splattered all over the place. Paul could feel the mush of the flesh and blood when some of it landed on his face. His hands shook in fear. Paul knew that he had to focus so that Lucas would get him out of there. The red glow engulfed him again. Images started appearing in his mind. The same old man could now be seen in a house. He quickly tried to take note of every little detail of where the house was. Initially, there wasn't much for him to deduce the location. It looked like any other rich man's house he had seen on the media. Then the old man walked into a bedroom with two undead behind him. Paul glanced at all the items in the bedroom, desperately trying to look for something. Something that could let him pinpoint where this house was. Finally, he found it. A photo hanging on the bedroom wall. And in that photo, with a happy family smiling, was someone he could recognize. Forlan, one of the city's media tycoons. "I've found it," Paul shouted. But Lucas was too busy to answer him. The undead awakened, unleashed a torrent of wind blades at him. Lucas, using his fist, punched at the wind blades. The undead awakened, then lunged at him before the wind blades dissipated. Plop. Lucas activated his gravity ability and doubled the gravity surrounding him. The sudden increase of force pulled the undead awakened down to the ground, giving out a loud sound. Hordes of undead men and women tried to follow up, running towards the opening of the ice wall. Their pace stopped, and some of them also dropped to the ground. The next moment, an amber glow appeared in front of Lucas. Sheba opened its huge mouth and took a bite out of those closest to it. Heads rolled on the ground when it spat out whatever it had in its mouth. It then charged at the horde of men and women, hurling them into the air as it went by. When Sheba stopped, the undead men and women tried to take a bite at it. Thud! Their teeth flew off when they did so. None of them could bite through the scales covering Sheba's body. Sheba opened its huge mouth once and gave them a bite in return. Its bite took out 3 heads of the undead men and women. Sheba spat them out, turned around and lunged at the other undead men and women. When it was done, Lucas summoned Sheba back into his summon space. He grabbed Paul, activated his gravity ability, and made the gravity of the surroundings half of the normal gravity. Lucas then took a step, kicked hard on the ground, leaping into the air. Soon, he and Paul got in the car. "Where to?" Lucas asked. Paul pointed in the direction of Forlan's mansion. "Birum." Lucas stepped on the pedal and the car drove off in that direction. "Hang on tight," Haryanto shouted as he rammed the armored car into a group of undead men and women. They were on their way to where the first awakened for the West Battle Administration area was hibernating. However, it wasn't going so well. The hibernation location was somewhere highly populated. Boom! An explosion went off right in front of the armored car. Chapter 126. Divined 1. Haryanto steered the armored car to the left. The tires screeched, leaving a trail on the asphalt road. Everyone in the armored car was hurled to the right side of the car. As awakened, they were able to recompose themselves very fast using their strength. Peter Lim and the governor weren't as lucky. They bumped into each other and slammed into the car door on the right side. Birum. Haryanto wanted to steer the armored car back to the center of the road, but the hordes of men and women had descended on them. A familiar face bumped into the windshield. It was Helen. Now she was one of those undead hordes of men and women. Helen tried to get to Haryanto by smashing her hands on the windshield. Birum. Haryanto changed the gear to reverse and stepped on the pedal. The armored car reversed. It rammed into some of the undead men and women, causing some of them to go under the armored car. Haryanto then steered right, stepped on the pedal and drove towards the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation. Boom! The armored car got near the gates, but an explosion went off again. This time it hit the engine compartment of the armored car, sending the armored car into a spiral. Hang on! Haryanto used his ability, trying to repair the car's engine and steer it to safety. It worked as the spiral slowly stopped and the armored car came to a halt. Get into the building. Riley gave his order, and everyone got out of the car. Emma and Rex had to pull Peter Lim and the governor along. Once they got out, an explosion ensued again. This sent them tumbling across the ground. When some undead men rushed at Haryanto, they opened their mouths, trying to take a bite out of him. Thud. However, the armor that was covering Haryanto stopped their bites. Haryanto then kicked at the legs of the undead men, sweeping them off their feet. He raised his hands and fired a plasma pulse at the remaining undead men coming at him. Bam! The plasma pulse pulverized them into ashes in an instant. Riley unleashed his lightning strike and stopped the undead men and women lunging at him. Margaret with her pistol fended off the undead with it. Boom! Another explosion suddenly went off, and this time the shockwave sent Emma with Peter Lim smashing into the wall of the broadcast corporation. Cough. Emma coughed out a mouthful of blood. And Peter Lim wasn't any better. He was disoriented and half-conscious. "There's someone creating these explosions," Riley shouted and glanced at the surroundings. Margaret ran towards Emma so that she could use her ability to heal Emma. Everyone glanced at the surroundings, trying to see who was unleashing the explosions. But all around them were the undead men and women. They looked the same to Riley and the others. As Margaret got close to Emma, Riley saw one of the undead men raise his hand. An amber glow engulfed his hand. Before the undead man could create an explosion, Riley unleashed a lightning strike at the undead man. Wham! His lightning strike was faster and it blasted the hand and half of the body of the undead man off. Sherry made a dash for the door and shouted at Riley and the others, "Hurry! We must get there before the Shadow Lotus." They had decided to come to the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation so that they could have a total view of the city, with its myriad network of cameras. The 24-hour non-stop entertainment anytime and anywhere might ironically prove to be useful in stopping the Shadow Lotus from getting to the First Awakened. Riley rushed in with the others, with Emma being helped by Margaret. When an undead man lunged at Riley, Harrianto punched at the undead man's head with his armored fist. This splattered the head into pieces. "To the control room," Riley shouted, and they ran towards the control room they saw earlier, when they participated in the show with Zack. On and off there were some undead men and women crawling or rushing at them. They were easily taken out by Riley and the team. Finally, when they got to the control room, they were relieved when they saw that the screens and cameras were still working. Harrianto took the producer's seat, placed his hands on the control panel and activated his ability. A white glow engulfed his hands and darted into the control panel. The images on the screens changed rapidly as Harrianto tried to see whether any of the cameras had captured the whereabouts of the Shadow Lotus. Sewers underground, the West Battle Administration Area. Men dressed in robes walked hurriedly towards a dark enclosure. They had witnessed what happened in the city and came down immediately to report. When they entered the dark enclosure, a white glow appeared in the middle of it. The Divine One opened his green eyes that were the same as the demonic beast in Jewel Lake. He was sitting in his huge chair, with his flesh bulging out of every opening in the chair. Divine One. There are undead wreaking havoc in the city everywhere. One of the cult members knelt and said. The Divine One closed his eyes and gave out a long hum. Thoughts entered his mind from far away. "It time," the voice said. The hum stopped and the Divine One opened his eyes. "Breach the sewage wall. Our saviors will be coming to salvage us." After the Divine One spoke, the cult members roared out in cheers. It was finally time for their saviors to descend on the West Battle Administration Area. Far away in Jewel Lake, demonic beasts with heads that looked like reptiles and bodies with scales swam around excitedly. They swarmed into a cave that had underground tunnels. These long and dark tunnels led to a destination they had been craving for a very long time. The West Battle Administration Area. Forlin's mansion. Lucas stopped his car outside the mansion. Paul gave out a sigh and reluctantly got down from it. The mansion was now in a mess with bodies lying on the ground. There were a few undead men and women growling and wandering around aimlessly. Lucas pulled back his arms and punched at these undead men and women. Chapter 127. Fight at the Mansion. Bladder. Lucas's punches broke the air, hurling airwaves at the undead men and women. When the airwaves hit, their heads were blown into pieces. With the coast clear, he turned to Paul and asked, "Where do you need to go to activate your ability?" Paul pointed at the entrance of the mansion and replied, "Inside the mansion." The old man last appeared inside it. Lucas wanted to bring Paul into the mansion but stopped. It was too quiet. Along the way there were many undead men and women he had to deal with. But right now the mansion seemed to be eerily quiet, a stark contrast to what he had encountered. All that he could hear were the distant sirens and screams. The gate and the door to the mansion, which were open, showed a glimpse of the dark surroundings inside. As if it were inviting him to enter, To be safe, Lucas summoned Sheba out of his summon space. An amber glow appeared in front of him and Sheba stepped out of the glow. Sheba jumped excitedly, wanting to snuggle next to Lucas. But Lucas stopped Sheba and used his thought to instruct Sheba to go into the mansion first as a precaution. "I promise you a treat when you are done," he said and patted Sheba on its head. Sheba nodded and turned toward the mansion. It walked through the front gate and entered the lawn between the gate and the mansion. When it got to the middle of it, fireballs were hurled toward it from a window on the mansion's second floor. The fireballs hit the ground and then bounced up from it. With the bounce, they came at Sheba from different directions. However, Sheba just grinned and opened its huge wide mouth. It leaped and snapped at the fireballs with its mouth. Within moments, Sheba had swallowed all the fireballs. Growl. A loud growl could be heard and a man engulfed in flames leaped out of the second floor. When the man covered in flames landed on the ground, the flames engulfing him burned everything he touched. The lawn and even the sand started to burn, turning into a hot burning liquid like lava. Hassan peeked out of the window and watched. He didn't understand why Ashen wanted him to stay here and prepare to deal with some possible nuisance. Lucas seemed like any other awakened with summoner ability, and his summoned beast didn't even look that powerful. The infected man engulfed in flames with master level of mastery for his S-level fire ability should be more than sufficient to deal with them. And if not, he had more backups. Whoosh! The man engulfed in flames lunged at Sheba. Sheba didn't bother to dodge, and it opened its mouth, shooting out huge fireballs at the man. Boom! The fireballs hit the man, and an explosion ensued. The man was hurled back toward the mansion, smashing through the wall, and lay on the ground. Growl. The man could only give out a low growl as he tried to get up. He couldn't. Only the lower half of his head was left. The flames engulfing him dissipated and the man lay on the ground motionlessly. Now that Lucas had upgraded his summoner ability, a familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points 2800/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 6. On top of what he had gotten earlier killing off the undead men and women along the way, he now had 2,800 slaughter points in total. Close enough for another ability upgrade. Hassan frowned at what had happened. Being able to take out an S-level awakened, Sheba was much more powerful than he had expected. He raised his hands and with his ability commanded the other infected awakened to take care of Sheba and Lucas. Lucas saw Hassan and he activated his gravity ability, making the surroundings half of what was normal. He took a step and leaped at the second floor of the mansion where Hassan was. Wham! After he shot into the air, Lucas unleashed his lightning strikes at Hassan. A man appeared from behind Hassan, pulling him away. Boom! The lightning strikes hit and the explosion blew a hole in the second floor of the mansion. However, the man wasn't dead and he lunged at Lucas who was still in the air. His hands were now metallic and sharpened like spears. The man tried to stab at Lucas's neck with them. However, before he could reach Lucas, he dropped drastically to the ground instead. Lucas had activated his gravity ability and doubled the gravity in the surroundings. Thud. When the man fell to the ground, giving out a loud thud, Sheba followed up with its huge mouth, tried to take a bite at the man's head. The man tried to stop Sheba by stabbing his sharp, pointed metallic hands at Sheba. Clank. It was, however, futile. Sheba's scales were too strong for his metallic ability. Snap. His jaws closed and snapped at the man's head. Sheba was surprised that it didn't manage to bite anything. When it took a step back, it saw that the man's head had melted away like liquid metal. Sheba tilted its head and took a bite at the man's body next. This time, there was no running away and it took a huge chunk of the man's body with its huge mouth. The man twitched and Sheba didn't stop. It kept going until the body of the man was ripped into many pieces. Meanwhile, Lucas landed on the second floor of the mansion and he chased after Hassan. Growl. When he got out of the corridor, 2 undead men lunged at him from the sides. He unleashed a lightning strike at each of them and continued his way down the flight of stairs to the ground floor. When he got down the last step of the staircase, he reached the huge living hall. Hassan was standing at the other end, ready for Lucas with two infected awakened standing in front of him. One of them opened his mouth, put his pinky finger into it and took a bite at it. He ripped it off his hand and started to munch on the pinky finger. As he did so, he mumbled something at Lucas. The next moment, Lucas felt a splitting headache and he felt like knocking his head against the wall to make it go away. The other man then lunged at Lucas. Chapter 128. Ashen, Leroy, and Risa. The man coming at Lucas took a deep breath and opened his mouth. A high-pressure waterspout came out from it and shot at Lucas. Lucas wanted to conjure an ice wall to block the waterspout but couldn't. There were murmurs coming into his mind, making him feel disoriented. He figured it was due to the man chewing on his own finger and mumbling to himself. The man must have been someone with SSS-level curse ability. Thud. The water spout hit his right shoulder. His dark matter vault armor tried to protect him by hardening its armor plates, but it wasn't enough. It was sliced through by the water spout. The water spout got through and sliced Lucas's right shoulder open. Lucas rolled to the side when he saw the man taking in another deep breath. Another high-pressure water spout came at him. The high-pressure water spout chased after Lucas and sliced through the ground and furniture that came in the way. Lucas leaped behind a sofa and the man unleashed another water spout at him. Crack. The sofa was sliced into halves, but Lucas wasn't anywhere in sight. He was hiding in either one of the halves. The man took another deep breath and unleashed a water spout on the right side. When the right half of the sofa was sliced into pieces and Lucas was behind it, the man turned his head, wanting to move the water spout sideways. Lucas stood up and popped up with his grenade launcher in his hands. Hassan's eyes opened wide when he saw Lucas pulling the trigger. Pong! A volley of grenades fired from the grenade launcher at Hassan and the infected awakened. The grenades exploded, shaking the living hall. Debris fell from the ceiling and the living hall was covered in smoke and dust. Lucas's blood and pain from his wound made him wake from the curse for a moment. It was enough for him to use his shadow wielder ability. His shadow stretched out toward where the man munching on his own finger was. When his shadow grabbed onto something there, Lucas yanked and pulled hard with his shadow. The man was flung his way immediately. Lucas didn't hesitate and punched directly at the man's head. His punch ripped through the man's head, splattering the flesh and white matter all over the area. The next moment, the headache in his mind went away. When the smoke and dust settled, Lucas saw that Hassan and the other man were engulfed in a sphere of water. The sphere of water engulfing Hassan dropped and splashed onto the ground. Hassan needed to breathe and couldn't be inside the sphere of water for long. Wham! Lucas raised his hands and unleashed his lightning strikes. Without the curse on him, Lucas could now use his ability to the fullest. The man engulfed in the sphere of water tried to block Lucas's lightning strikes but couldn't. His shadow was being grabbed by Lucas's shadow. Hassan didn't have time to plead before he was pulverized into a red mist by Lucas's lightning strikes. Lucas then turned his focus on the last remaining man. But before he could do anything, the sphere of water engulfing the man dropped to the ground, splashing all over. The man fell onto the ground next, giving out a loud thud. Lucas slowly approached the man with flickers of lightning in his hands. He gave out a sigh when he saw that the man was now dead, as he should be. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 1800. Current slaughter points 3600/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 6. All over the West Battle Administration area, the same thing happened. The hordes of undead men and women stopped moving and dropped to the ground. Survivors who were hiding or fighting against the hordes of undead men and women knelt and grieved. What had happened was too much for them to bear. Their family, close friends, and loved ones had turned against them suddenly. Many had perished and they had seen some even give up, voluntarily becoming one of the undead. Nothing could describe the feeling of witnessing sons ripping the flesh out of their parents. Finally, the ordeal was over. Peace would be restored by the soldiers and Center Battle Administration area, they thought. What the hell happened? Rex said. He was guarding the entrance to the control room with Emma, fending off the undead men and women trying to come in. Suddenly, these undead men and women had dropped dead onto the ground. Lucas must have succeeded, Emma replied. He was just as dependable as usual. She ran over to the control panel where everyone was to confirm. On the screens, the hordes of undead were now all lying on the ground motionlessly. Lucas, can you hear me? Riley spoke into his earbuds. I'm just done with getting rid of the man behind the necromancer virus. A faint reply came back from Lucas. Riley and the others gave out a sigh of relief. At least this time it was going their way. Come meet us at the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation. We are trying to figure out where the Shadow Lotus are, Riley said. I'll be on my way, Lucas replied. Wait, Harrianto interjected and pointed at one of the screens. The video on the screen had 3 men in it. They looked familiar to Riley and the others. It was Ashen, Leroy, and Risa. They were getting out of the governor's residence, not looking very pleased. Ashen gave them some instructions and both of them nodded. A dark opening appeared and the 3 of them got into it. The dark opening closed and they disappeared. Where would they go? Harrianto asked. Riley thought for a moment and spoke into the earbuds. Lucas, anything peculiar about the man behind the necromancer virus? He seemed to be waiting for me, Lucas replied. Riley and Lucas then had the same thought. The Shadow Lotus were coming for Lucas. Where are you now? You better move fast, Riley asked. No one knew how far Ashen's ability could bring him each time he got into the dark opening. On my way. Lucas didn't waste any time and got out of Forlan's mansion. He summoned Sheba back into his summon space and met up with Paul. They got into the car and Lucas stepped on the pedal, driving off toward the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation. Along the streets were still empty with everyone still reeling from what had happened, which made Lucas uneasy. He was just too prominent. A slit appeared in the air. Chapter 129, Old Rivals. The slit opened up with a dark void inside. Ashen, Risa, and Leroy got out of the opening, and they landed onto the rooftop of a building that was 10 stories tall. Cold wind blew against their faces as they glanced down at the streets and surroundings. Risa, do your job, Ashen said. The CCTV network at the governor's residence and the cameras in the surroundings were destroyed by Harrianto. Risa couldn't get any useful information out of it. So, they had to get far enough for Risa to get into the surveillance network. He walked over to the antennas and receiver dishes that were installed on the rooftop. Using his hands, he grabbed onto the antennas. A white glow appeared from his hands and it darted into the antennas. As Risa did his work, Leroy sat by the ledge of the rooftop, lit a cigarette and marveled at the carnage and destruction they had caused. Pity that old man Hassan is dead now. This was so much fun, he said and gave out a huge puff from the cigarette. Focus on our mission. We need to find out where the governor is. Without the activation device, the first awakened tissue and blood is useless to us. Ashen warned Leroy of their intentions. Leroy wasn't too pleased. He shrugged his shoulders and kept quiet. He knew that he was no longer a match for Ashen after Ashen got infused with tissue and blood from Athena and an apex demonic beast. A thought went through his mind, but he quickly snapped out of it. The Dark Lord wouldn't be pleased with him, he thought. Got them. The man who killed Hassan is on his way to meet up with the rest of them. They are hiding in the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation with the governor. Risa, with his ability, had gotten into the Broadcast Corporation's network. And it was a double-edged sword for him to figure out the location of where they were. We've met them before in the South Battle Administration area and Peter Lim's mansion, Risa said. Ashen frowned as he recalled their encounter with Lucas and his teammates. His memory of dealing with Lucas and Sheba was still fresh. Every time they encountered Lucas, he got even stronger. And the worst thing about it was how Sheba was immune to his ability. His newfound ability might work against Lucas and Sheba, but Ashen wasn't one to take a gamble. Ashen pondered for a short moment and he glanced over at Leroy. Leroy, go and deal with the man trying to meet up with the others in the Broadcast Corporation. I need you to delay him while we go to the Broadcast Corporation to get the governor. Leroy stood up, spat his cigarette onto the ground and exclaimed, "About time for some action." He glanced over to Risa and asked, "Where is that bastard?" A part of Risa's armor broke off and it started to turn into a drone. "Follow the drone. It shall lead you to the man." The drone flew away and Leroy quickly went after it. Using his ability, his hands stretched and he grabbed onto the rooftop of the other building nearby. Leroy leaped and his hands started to contract, bringing him across the gap between the buildings. Lucas stopped the car and got out of it. There was a pileup of cars in front of him and he had to clear the path. He walked up to the pile of cars, activated his gravity ability and, with his enormous strength, picked up the cars and threw them to the side like toy cars. Crash. The cars made a loud sound when they crashed onto the roadside. Lucas stopped and looked up when he saw a drone hovering above him. "Haryanto, you have a drone coming for me?" Lucas spoke into the earbuds and asked. "Drone? No, I didn't do anything," Haryanto replied. Lucas frowned as he knew what this meant. The Shadow Lotus must have gotten to know their whereabouts. He wanted to ask them to quickly leave for another location, but a fist came at his face from above. Thud. The fist missed and it plunged into the road surface. Lucas saw Leroy lunge at him from above next. He pulled back his arm and gave Leroy a punch. Boom. The punch broke through the air, giving out a loud boom and an airwave shot at Leroy. Leroy was caught by surprise. Lucas wasn't able to do so when they battled previously. He quickly flattened his body like a piece of paper, making use of the air to float away from the airwave coming at him. Wham! Lucas was ready for him and he unleashed lightning strikes at Leroy. It gave Leroy no choice but to turn into his other form. A pile of flesh splashed down onto the asphalt road, barely dodging the lightning strikes. Some of the lightning strikes caught Leroy and a smell of charred flesh filled the surroundings. "Damn you!" Leroy went into a rage and the puddle of flesh lunged at Lucas. Lucas placed his hands onto the ground, and an ice wall rose in front of him. Thud! The puddle of flesh hit the ice wall, smashing through it. A hand appeared out of the puddle of flesh and it shot at Lucas's neck. To his horror, Leroy felt his weight suddenly doubled and the puddle of flesh squashed onto the ground. Lucas had activated his gravity ability and made the surroundings have twice the normal gravity. Arg! Leroy gave out a cry of pain as he struggled to move away from Lucas. Lucas pointed his hands at Leroy and flickers of light danced around as he accumulated his energy for his lightning strikes. Wham! Bright flashes lit the surroundings when Lucas unleashed the lightning strikes. The puddle of flesh bubbled as the temperature increased in an instant. Leroy gave out a cry and an explosion ensued. Boom! The surface of the road exploded, sending asphalt, tiny rocks and dust into the air. Lucas took a step forward to check on Leroy. Whoosh! He felt a gust of wind coming at him from his sides. Chapter 130, New Tricks. There were now 2 puddles of flesh coming at Lucas from the sides. Lucas raised his arms to swipe away the puddles of flesh. He felt another gust of wind then coming from behind his head and he ducked. There was another puddle of flesh in ambush waiting for the right opportunity. The 2 puddles of flesh held on to the puddle of flesh that came from behind and they made use of the momentum to get far away from Lucas. Fighting against Lucas under double gravity was disadvantageous, and splitting himself into 3 with his ability took up a lot of energy from Leroy. Bladder. When the 3 puddles of flesh dropped onto the ground, they merged back into one. Leroy turned back into his human form and he cracked his knuckles and spat onto the ground. Lucas frowned and knew he had to finish Leroy off fast. Ashen and Risa must be on their way to the West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation. You know what? I got to give it to you. Why don't you join us? Being an awakened, we should be ruling the world. Why fight for scraps and let the others enjoy all the resources? Leroy started to give a speech trying to delay for time, but Lucas wasn't going to engage in it. An amber glow had appeared behind Leroy as he spoke. Snap! Sheba snapped at Leroy's head from behind with its huge mouth. Leroy, using his elasticity, extended his neck and swung his head away from where it was. When his head swung back, he wrapped his neck around Sheba's neck, trying to strangle it. Arg! Sheba's body was engulfed in flames the next moment. The heat caused Leroy's skin to be burnt, and he immediately uncoiled from Sheba's body. He wanted to get away from Sheba, but he realized that he couldn't. Lucas had used his shadow wielder ability and held onto his legs. With Leroy stuck where he was, Lucas placed his hands onto the ground. Ice extended out from his hands and moved towards the direction where Leroy was. Lucas decided to try and freeze Leroy instead. West Battle Administration Area Broadcast Corporation. Meanwhile, in the control room, "I've notified the leader. Help should arrive in half an hour," Sherry said. It might be their only hope to stop the Shadow Lotus if Lucas couldn't make it back within half an hour. Riley nodded and tried to come up with a plan. They would need to stall for help, keeping the governor's hands safe and the activation device out of Shadow Lotus's reach. One way was to split the team, with some of them getting the governor and the activation device out of here. Or they would stay here hiding the governor until Lucas or reinforcements from the leader arrive. Riley glanced at everyone and briefed them on what he had in mind. "Emma and Harrianto can take the governor for a wild ride," Rex said. Emma wasn't too pleased and said, "We should stay as a team. We are no match for them if we split." The governor nodded furiously at what Emma said. He definitely felt safer with as many awakened around him. "Shut up!" Rex shouted and gave the governor a punch in his abdomen. The governor raised his hands, pleading for him to stop. Riley gave out a sigh and glanced over at Sherry. Sherry frowned at the difficult task for her. She was with the team for a short time and she wouldn't want to risk their lives with a bad decision. "Come on, we don't have much time left," Rex said. Harrianto tapped Riley's shoulder. Riley turned and saw Harrianto pointing at one of the screens, which was showing the camera feed to the entrance of the control room. A slit appeared out of the air and opened. 2 men got out of it. Risa lunged at the door with his shoulder. He smashed through the obstacles Riley and the others had placed behind the entrance. "Emma and Margaret, take care of the governor and the activation device." Riley gave his orders and they got into position. He unleashed a lightning strike at Ashen. And as expected, a dark opening appeared in front of Ashen, absorbing the lightning strike into the void. Whip. Rex conjured up his spiky rock whip and lashed it at Ashen's feet. Thud. It caught Ashen by surprise, hitting Ashen's ankle, and Ashen quickly leaped away from it. Riley, who was now protected by his lightning armor, lunged at Ashen where Ashen landed. Ashen gave out a roar and his hands were engulfed in a dark glow. He swiped them down onto Riley's lightning armor. The dark glow on his hands absorbed and took away the lightning engulfing Riley. Riley dodged to the right side of Ashen and unleashed a lightning strike at Ashen from close range. Wham! Ashen wasn't fast enough to conjure up an opening and he turned his body, using his arm to block. The lightning strike hit, causing an explosion. Riley wanted to follow up with another strike but stopped. Ashen's arm swung at him. Thud. Riley could see the world spinning as he was hurled into the air by Ashen's swing of his arm. Cough. He coughed out a mouthful of blood, and when he stood up, he could see that Ashen's arm looked different. It didn't look like a human's flesh but more like a demonic beast's flesh instead. "Well, you are not the only ones to get new abilities," Ashen said and raised his eerie-looking right arm. Flickers of bright light appeared from his right arm. A white sphere engulfed his right arm like the white sphere of Athena's. Riley's eyes opened wide at what he saw. A torrent of lightning strikes appeared out of the white sphere and whipped around into the surroundings. They destroyed whatever was in their path, causing the equipment and concrete to turn into debris. Ashen smirked and pointed his right arm at Riley. "Riley!" Rex shouted and lashed out with his spiky rock whip at Ashen. The spiky rock whip broke into halves when a dark opening appeared in front of Ashen and caught the whip. "No!" Rex tried to conjure a rock wall in front of Riley, hoping it was enough. Chapter 131. Road Rage. Everyone gasped as the control room was filled with the bright flash of light. Arg! They heard a loud cry of pain. To their surprise, it was Ashen's voice instead of Riley's. The white sphere of light engulfing Ashen's arm was gone. He knelt on the ground with his hands holding his head. Ashen's expression was one of pain. Sherry had used her ability and tried to take control of Ashen. But it was a struggle. Ashen's eyes bulged out of his eye sockets and he stared at Sherry. "I can't hold on any longer," Sherry whispered into the earbuds. Riley glanced over at the others. Emma, Harrianto, and Margaret were in a tussle with Risa. Risa, with his new armored body, raised his hands and tried to shoot out plasma pulses from it. But Emma surprised him with her poison net. The poison net came at him from all directions. Sizzle. When the poison net latched onto the armor of Risa, it started to try and get through the armor. Emma then took a deep breath and blew out a mouthful of red poison smoke at Risa. Compartments opened up from the back of Risa's armor. Small drones flew out of the compartments towards Emma. Bam! Harrianto shot at the drones, putting them down one by one. The distraction was enough for Risa's body to break apart. The pieces from Risa's body got out of the hold from Emma's poison net and flew away from the red poison smoke. Risa's hand merged back and an amber glow appeared from it. Bam! A plasma pulse shot from Risa's hand at Emma. Harrianto pushed Emma to the side. But he wasn't quick enough. The top of Emma's arm got hit and her flesh was instantly pulverized. "Emma!" Margaret shouted and quickly activated her healing ability. Riley knew he had to think of something quick. Beads of sweat rolled down from Sherry's forehead as she tried her best to control Ashen. Slowly, Ashen tried to stand up. He could feel the force coming into his mind getting weaker. Ashen smirked and gritted his teeth at Sherry, gesturing to her that she would be next when he breaks free from her control. Sherry wasn't intimidated. She exerted more energy to her ability. Arg! Ashen gave out a soft cry and knelt on the ground again. "Get ready to make a run for it," Riley whispered into his earbuds. That was the best thing they could do now. He raised his hands and unleashed a lightning strike at Risa. Wham! The lightning strike came at Risa from behind. Boom! An energy field appeared and engulfed Risa's body. When the lightning strike hit, an explosion ensued. Emma, Harrianto, and Margaret took the opportunity and made a dash out of the entrance. The governor, with the fear for his life, followed them along with Peter Lim. Peter Lim was more than familiar with how the Shadow Lotus operated. A huge cloud of red poison smoke was then blown at Risa. Boom! On the other side, Rex with his spiky rock whip lashed it at the ceiling of the control room, causing the cables and concrete to fall from it. They crashed down onto Ashen, who was kneeling on the ground. Riley, Rex, and Sherry then made a dash for the entrance. The commotion that Lucas heard from his earbuds made him realize that he had to finish it off quickly. Sheba snapped at Leroy with its huge mouth while the ice extended towards Leroy's legs. Leroy gave out a roar and he turned into a puddle of flesh again. The puddle of flesh slithered backwards, trying to get away from the ice. Swipe. Sheba tried to use its paws to claw at the puddle of flesh. But Leroy was evasive as hell, changing his direction when Sheba's claw came at him. Virum. To his surprise, Leroy heard an engine sound roar. He took a glance and saw that Lucas was on the car. Lucas stepped on the pedal and the car sped away. What the hell? Come fight like a man. Leroy was angered by Lucas's sudden change of action. He wanted to lash out at Sheba, but he saw an amber glow engulfing Sheba. And the next moment, Sheba was gone, summoned back into Lucas's summon space. Leroy had no choice but to turn back into human form. He glanced at his surroundings where there were many abandoned cars. He opened the door of one that looked still operable. Thud. Pulling out the dead driver, Leroy threw the body onto the asphalt ground and got into the driver's seat. "Show me where he went," he shouted at the drone of Risa hovering above. The drone turned and flew in the direction where Lucas went. Crash. Lucas crashed through a car in the way. He didn't have the luxury to slowly veer through the small opening in the road. It jolted him in the driver's seat and the airbag deployed. If not for Lucas's physique, he would have been knocked out cold. He quickly placed his hand onto the airbag and unleashed a small flash of lightning strike. The lightning strike burst the airbag and the airbag deflated. "Where are you headed?" Lucas spoke into the earbuds. "We are heading for the wall. If there are soldiers still able to fight there, they might be able to help. We just need to hold on until the leader's reinforcements arrive here." Riley replied with his plan. There were no demonic beasts that had penetrated into the city, which meant that the defenses were most likely still intact. Lucas nodded and replied, "On my way there." Screech. The tires of the car screeched as he took a hard left onto the highway towards the edge of the city. Edge of the city. Keen lit a cigarette and puffed a mouthful of smoke from it. Beside him were soldiers at the checkpoint and those on duty to guard the wall. They were exhausted from fending off hordes of undead men and women. Luckily for them, all of the undead men and women dropped dead suddenly. Keen wasn't ready to get back to his office to face the carnage. So he rather stayed here with the soldiers and let everything sink in for him. His hand froze in the air, holding the cigarette in it as he saw something coming. A truck slowly approached and everyone got on high alert. A man got out of the truck with a container in his hands. The man gave an eerie smile and he opened the container. A white glow got out of the container. Chapter 132. The Wall. The white glow flew towards Keen and the soldiers. Keen knew something was up and he didn't stand around and watch. He made a run for it. Arg! Keen was right as the white glow unleashed white flames at the soldiers who were curious about what it was. The white flames burnt those caught by it into ash within a few moments. The soldiers panicked and they opened fire at the white glow and the truck. Men streamed out of the truck and ran towards the soldiers. "May our saviors free us all," they shouted as they were gunned down by the soldiers. "Stop!" one of the soldiers shouted. The men from the truck were now all dead. What the hell was that? Maybe the undead had gotten to them and they turned crazy? Everyone glanced at each other with a perturbed look. No one knew what had happened. Meanwhile, some of the men from the Divine Flame cult had made use of the distraction and gotten down into the sewers near the wall. Some of them gagged at the smell of sewage water. They held it in and ran in the direction of the wall. Lucas saw the drone in the air from the rearview mirror. He figured it must be tracking his whereabouts for Leroy. Screech. He stepped hard onto the brakes and changed into reverse gear. The momentum of the drone didn't stop and soon, it was not too far above in the air from Lucas. Lucas activated his gravity ability. The gravity in the surroundings increased by double and the drone started to tilt left and right, struggling to stay in the air. Lucas opened the car door and raised his hand at the drone. Wham! Flickers of light appeared in his hand and he unleashed a lightning strike at the drone. The lightning strike hit the drone, causing it to explode into pieces. With the drone gone, Lucas changed his gear and stepped on the accelerator. The tires screeched, giving out some smoke, and the car sped away from the drone's wreckage. He was going to the wall from the southern highway while Riley and the others were taking the central highway. From the car's navigation system, Lucas could see that he should arrive before them as he was nearer to the wall. When he saw the cold icy wall not too far away, he tapped on the steering wheel with his fingers, hoping for the car to go faster. But before that, Lucas summoned the system's information panel in his mind. Ding! Current slaughter points, 3600/40,000. Host level, 6. Current abilities, 6. SSS level physique, novice, 0/3000. SSS level shadow wielder, novice, 0/3000. SSS level summoner, adept, 0/9000. SSS level ice ability, novice, 0/3000. SSS level lightning ability, adept, 0/9000. SSS level gravity ability, novice, 0/3000. He still had enough slaughter points to upgrade his abilities. It might come in handy to give Ashen and the others a nasty surprise. He thought about the gravity ability as it was very useful so far. Improvements in Adept Level of Mastery. SSS Gravity Ability allows host to increase/decrease gravity by 3 times within a radius of 90 feet. Allow host to apply gravity to a person. Effect lasts for 30 seconds. Energy usage of ability halved. Lucas was intrigued by the ability to apply the gravity on a particular person. It would mean that he could fly in the air like Athena, and also he could make things attracted to a person by letting the person have 3 times as much gravity as the ground. With that in mind, Lucas silently thought why in his mind. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host! SSS level gravity ability upgraded to Adept Level of Mastery. A surge of energy and knowledge about how to use the upgraded ability entered his mind. Stop! When Lucas reached the checkpoint at the wall, the soldiers pointed their weapons at him and shouted. After what happened earlier with the truck, they were now wary of anyone approaching. Lucas raised his hand and shouted, "I'm here to seek help. My teammates will be here soon with the governor." The commander of the checkpoint frowned at what he heard. Keen tapped on the shoulder of the commander. "I know this guy. He is an awakened. Most likely they were tasked to protect and get the governor to safety." "You sure?" the commander asked. Keen offered a cigarette to the commander, lit it up for him and said, "I'm sure. Think about the rewards and promotions you will get if you protect the governor well." The commander took a puff from the cigarette and glanced over at the soldiers. The soldiers put down their weapons. "Where are your so-called teammates?" the commander asked. He had his answer the next moment. High-pitched sounds of tires screeching could be heard not far away. It got nearer and nearer. "Lucas, watch out!" Haryanto shouted as he tried to steer the armored car out of the way. The soldiers at the checkpoint ducked as the armored car headed for them. Using his ability, Haryanto tried his best and spun the car to the side. The car tilted onto its side, traveling along with only 2 of its wheels. Plop! The car got back on its 4 wheels after a few moments. Riley and the rest got out of the armored car once it stopped. Emma, holding on to the activation device, grabbed the governor and went behind the soldiers. Peter Lim gasped for air and crawled along closely behind. "Protect me," the governor commanded. "Calm down, governor. I don't see anyone else," the commander said. He gestured to the soldiers, and they moved in to stand in front of the governor and Emma. Here they come." The governor pointed into the air and stammered. A slit appeared in the air, and it opened with a dark void inside it. "Fire!" the commander shouted, and the soldiers opened fire at the opening. Bullets pelted upon the dark opening, but they just disappeared upon going into the void. A few more slits appeared in the air. The soldiers hesitated for a moment when all the slits opened. Out of one of the slits, 2 men emerged from it. It was Ashen and Risa. Chapter 133. Ashen. "I'll take care of the man with dimensional ability," Lucas shouted at Riley and the others. Riley and the others nodded and moved into position. They encircled Risa, who was standing to the left of Ashen, in a half-circle formation. Risa's armor opened with many compartments, and small robots in the form of dragonflies flew out from the compartments. Wham! Riley unleashed his lightning strikes at the dragonflies, taking out a few of them. Next to him, Rex wielded his spiky rock whips at the incoming dragonflies, ripping them in half with them. Emma, who was standing at the extreme end of the formation, blew out a mouthful of poison at Risa. A poison net appeared in front of her, and she flung it at Risa. Robotic snakes, released by Haryanto, slithered from the ground towards Risa at the same time. Risa frowned when he saw so many things coming at him. His dragonflies were now all eliminated by Riley and Rex. Taking on 5 awakened, one with SSS level lightning and the others with SS level abilities, at the same time was too much for him. He gave out a loud roar and an energy field engulfed his body. When the poison net wrapped around the energy field, it started to give off smoke while it tried to burn through the energy field. The poison smoke also couldn't do much to the energy field. The robotic snakes tried to get through the energy field with their sharp fangs and surgical devices. but it was to no avail. Clank. Their sharp fangs and surgical devices couldn't get through the energy field. Wham! Riley followed up with a lightning strike next. The lightning strike hit the energy field, and it flickered for a split second. Seeing this, Riley recalled how Lucas used his lightning strikes to deplete the energy field to get to Risa. He quickly utilized his new lightning armor. The lightning armor engulfed Riley's body, and he lunged at Risa's energy field next. Risa wanted to raise his hand and shoot a plasma pulse at Riley, but he realized he couldn't. A brown glow had gone past his energy field and darted into his head. Sherry had used her ability to control his body. It was now a physical battle and a tussle of the mind. With Risa unable to retaliate due to Sherry's control, Riley came up to Risa without much difficulty. The lightning engulfing his body slithered and shifted away from his body and onto his fist. Riley then pounded at the energy field with his fist covered in lightning. Boom! As every fist struck, the lightning caused an explosion, releasing all the energy and power onto the energy field. Flicker. The energy field started to flicker with every punch Riley rained upon it. Risa knew he had to do something quick, as it was only a matter of time before Riley got through his energy field. He glanced over to Ashen to see if Ashen could help. Meanwhile, Ashen was wary of Lucas. He recalled he had a summoned beast who could devour his ability. He had to make the battle end quickly, Ashen thought. Lucas thought the same thing as he prepared for his surprise attack. He saw Ashen raise his arm and a white sphere engulf it. Lucas frowned as it was something he hadn't seen from Ashen before. It curiously reminded him of Athena's powers as strands of lightning strikes started to crackle and extend out from the white sphere. Well, two can do the same, Lucas thought to himself silently. Using his gravity ability, he applied it to himself, making the gravity 3 times less for him. Ashen looked in astonishment when he saw Lucas start floating in the air. Lucas then stretched out his hands with lightning extending out of them, just like Ashen's right arm. Is he one of the first awakened? Ashen thought to himself. He quickly threw the thought out of his mind. It was not possible. Lucas must be playing some tricks on him. Not wasting more time, Ashen aimed his right arm at Lucas in the air. Wham! The torrents of lightning strikes shot at Lucas. But Lucas was ready, and he flew higher up into the air, dodging the lightning strikes. Boom! The torrents of lightning strikes hit the cold icy wall, taking out huge chunks of the ice. As the shards of ice flew and landed, they crushed some of the cars and buildings in the surroundings. Ashen gave out a huge roar, and his body was covered in a dark glow. He tried to leap into the air to catch hold of Lucas next. Arg! Ashen gave out a soft cry in pain when he suddenly felt his body and organs being pulled down by the gravity. Lucas had used the gravity ability to make the area where Ashen was have 3 times the normal gravity. He descended from the air and then aimed his hands with lightning strikes at Ashen. Wham! The lightning strikes shot at Ashen, but they went into the dark glow immediately. They were not able to cause any damage to Ashen. Ashen tried to lunge at Lucas but could only leap and land at the halfway point between him and Lucas. A slit opened in front of Ashen. The only way for him was to use his dimensional ability to get close to Lucas. But as he was getting into the dark opening, an amber glow appeared. Ashen knew what was next and he didn't stop. When Sheba appeared, it snapped at Ashen with its huge mouth, but it was only able to take out a chunk of flesh from Ashen's waist. The dark opening closed and there was silence. Lucas glanced over at where the governor was with the activation device. He was right as he saw a slit appear beside the governor. Lucas raised his hand and activated his gravity ability on the governor, making the gravity on the governor 3 times less, causing him to float upwards into the air. When the slit opened up, and Ashen tried to grab onto the governor with his hands, he missed. All that Ashen could hold onto was thin air. Bang! Soldiers started to open fire on Ashen's arms extending out from the dark opening. Bullets shot at Ashen's arm, but they dissipated as they went into the dark opening and onto the dark glow engulfing his arms. Slither. A puddle of flesh came out from the side, and it tried to lunge at the governor. It was Leroy hiding undercover all this while. Chapter 134. Fight with Shadow Lotus. Lucas pointed his hand at Leroy and activated his gravity ability. In an instant, Leroy fell to the ground. The surroundings had 3 times the gravity now. Soldiers struggled to stand up and many of them fell flat on the ground. The governor descended from the air, and he quickly ran towards Lucas for safety. Ashen pulled Leroy into the dark opening with his hands and the dark opening closed. Lucas deactivated his gravity ability and the soldiers felt relief when the pull upon them from the ground went away. They stood up with their arms looking around the surroundings warily for Ashen appearing at any moment. "Watch out!" Lucas shouted when he saw the slit appear behind Sherry. "Whip!" Rex lashed out his spiky rock whip at Ashen and Leroy when they appeared out of the dark opening. However, his spiky rock whip broke when part of it hit the dark glow engulfing Ashen's body. In the next moment, the puddle of flesh lunged at Rex. Bam! Haryanto shot out a plasma pulse at the puddle of flesh. The plasma pulse hit the puddle of flesh, and it splashed into 2 puddles. One of the puddles continued its trajectory and headed for Rex, and the other puddle came for Haryanto. Crush! Rex's right arm was crushed as the puddle of flesh wrapped around it and strangled hard. It was the same for Haryanto. Crack! Part of Haryanto's armor made up of hard steel and electronics cracked into pieces. The puddle of flesh wrapped around Haryanto's neck. 2 compartments rose from Haryanto's shoulder, and inside them were 2 miniature cannons. The cannons rotated towards Haryanto's neck and shot out plasma pulses at the puddle of flesh. Thud! The puddle of flesh twitched and released its grip for a moment. Haryanto took the opportunity and used his hands to grab onto the puddle of flesh. Sizzle! Flames blew out from Haryanto's palm, burning the puddle of flesh. It caused pain for Leroy and the puddle of flesh dripped out from Haryanto's grip and onto the ground. Raising his foot, he tried to stomp on the puddle of flesh. Slither! The puddle of flesh slithered away and lunged onto Rex's arm, merging back together with the other puddle. Haryanto pointed his palm at Rex's arm. Flames shot out from his palm at the puddle of flesh. As the puddle of flesh sizzled, it dripped onto the ground and slithered away. Meanwhile, Ashen swiped his hands at Sherry from behind her. Sherry had no choice but to relinquish her control over Risa's mind and rolled to the side. Strands of her hair dissipated as Ashen's hands touched them. But he had missed, and Sherry was now to his right side. A brown glow appeared from her forehead and darted at Ashen's head. Ashen wasn't about to be controlled for the second time. A slit opened behind him, and he leaped into the dark opening. Sherry's ability with the brown glow tried to reach into the dark opening, but all she got was the void. The dark opening closed and Ashen was nowhere to be seen again. Sherry turned her focus onto Leroy, who wasn't far away. The brown glow turned and darted towards Leroy instead. The puddle of flesh separated itself and the 2 halves of it lunged at Sherry from her left and right side. Plop! The puddles of flesh dropped onto the ground. Lucas had used his gravity ability and made the puddle of flesh have 3 times the gravity. Now it had difficulty slithering away. With flickers of light in his hands, Lucas lunged at the puddle of flesh and unleashed his lightning strikes at it. The surroundings were brightened in an instant, but it was too bright, even for his lightning strikes. Ashen had appeared not too far away, and with his right arm, unleashed the torrent of lightning strikes at Lucas. He expected Lucas to be pulverized by his torrent of lightning strikes. But all he saw was Sheba with its huge mouth, swallowing every bit of his lightning strikes. "What in the world?" Ashen exclaimed as he gathered all his energy to sustain the lightning strikes. The torrent of lightning strikes grew thicker and more powerful, lashing out at the surroundings. It ruptured through the concrete and even the ice wall. All around, debris, smoke and dust flew in the air. "D!" Ashen shouted as he used more of his energy. But Sheba just took it all in. Sheba was like a void itself. Finally, when Ashen didn't have much energy left, he stopped. Burp. Sheba gave out a loud burp and it looked at Ashen with its head tilted, as if it was asking for more. But Ashen wasn't able to do so anymore. He had to change the plan. If they couldn't harvest the first awakened for the West Battle Administration area now, they could do so for an apex demonic beast first. Lucas was such a menace. Every time Ashen encountered him again, he had grown stronger and gained new abilities. Maybe only the Dark Lord would be able to deal with him now. With this in mind, he glanced over at Leroy and Risa. Lucas had unleashed his lightning strikes at Leroy, causing Leroy to be hurt. The puddle of flesh was now charred with a huge smudge of crimson within it. Flickers of lightning appeared in Lucas's hands again, when he prepared for his next strike. Ashen leaped away to the side where a dark opening was ready for him. Sheba opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of lightning strikes at Ashen. Bladder. The lightning strikes caught Ashen's legs, ripping out a huge chunk of his flesh. But it wasn't enough to stop Ashen from disappearing into the dark opening. A slit appeared in front of Lucas next. One of Ashen's hands, engulfed in the dark glow, came at his neck. Lucas took a step back and dodged it. At the same time, the other hand of Ashen picked up the puddle of flesh from the ground. They disappeared into the dark opening the next moment. Lucas quickly turned and glanced over at Risa. The energy field engulfing Risa was now shimmering. Riley needed one more punch to break through it. Thud. His fist with lightning engulfing it landed on the energy field and the energy field dissipated. Bam! Risa shot a plasma pulse at Riley. Chapter 135 Handcuffs. Whoosh! The plasma pulse brushed past Riley's face, tearing out bits of his skin. Blood dripped down onto Risa. Riley pulled back his arm and gave a solid left hook to Risa's waist. Boom! The fist engulfed with lightning struck and an explosion ensued. Bits of Risa's armor broke as Riley's punch penetrated through the waist. Riley didn't stop and followed up with a right hook at Risa's head. Pop! Risa's head popped off from his body and flew away into the air. Thud! Riley's fist missed and the lightning strike engulfing his hands jolted into the surroundings. Seeing Risa's head in the air, Emma conjured a poison net in her hands and hurled the poison net at Risa's head. The head flew to the side, dodging the poison net. At the same time, the headless body of Risa rolled to the side and leaped into the air. Its hands then grabbed onto the head of Risa and put it back onto its body. Sheba opened its mouth, unleashing a torrent of lightning strikes at Risa. Rocket boosters came out of Risa's armor giving out boost, trying to steer away from the lightning strikes. But it wasn't enough. The torrent of lightning strikes was at least 30 feet in diameter, covering a huge area. Boom! When the lightning strikes hit Risa, they gave out a huge explosion. His body was obliterated into pieces. Parts from his armor rained down onto the ground. Risa's face was smudged with blood. Flesh was ripped out from it, showing the white bones beneath. His head had separated from his body again, barely making it away from Sheba's torrent of lightning strikes. Risa's head started to descend to the ground as he was now unconscious from the impact. A slit appeared on the ground where Risa's head was headed. In the next moment, a dark opening opened from the slit. Lucas raised his hands and aimed at Risa's head. Wham! He unleashed his lightning strikes at Risa's head, but Ashen's hands appeared with the dark glow. The dark glow took in Lucas's lightning strikes when they came into contact. Leroy's hands also stretched out from the dark opening. His hands caught Risa's head and it landed onto Leroy's palms. Whoosh! Leroy retracted his hands into the dark opening just as an ice spike shot down from above. Ashen's hand also retracted back into the dark opening next. With its huge mouth, Sheba tried to take a bite at the dark opening but was too late. Snap! It missed as its jaws closed, giving out a loud snapping sound. The dark opening had closed, and the slit disappeared within the next moment. We did it! Rex exclaimed when he saw Ashen's ability go away. This time they had successfully stopped the Shadow Lotus. I think so, Emma replied as she sat on the ground. She was tired after the long fight and her energy was low from utilizing her ability. No one had much energy to cheer even though it was quite an accomplishment by them. They had gone from not being opponents in the underground base to fighting them off now. They glanced over to Lucas at the same time. All of them knew that most of it was due to Lucas. They didn't know how much stronger Lucas could be, but the only thing important to them was that Lucas was one of them. I need a bite. Rex took out an energy bar and munched on it to recover his energy. The others also did the same, taking out replenishment to replenish their energy. Riley, Harrianto, Rex, and Sherry were all tired. Let me have a look. It was time for Margaret to do her job. She went over to Rex and placed her hands next to Rex's mangled arm. A white glow appeared from Margaret's hands, and the white glow darted and engulfed Rex's arm. Rex gave out a soft moan when he felt the pain soothed immediately. His bones started growing back, giving out crackling sounds. And his flesh twitched as the veins and tissues slowly grew. The warmth that he felt from the white glow made it tolerable as the healing process went on. Thanks, Margaret. Rex thanked her and gave out a sigh. He made a silent promise to himself to get a healer girlfriend when they got back home. Margaret went over to Riley next. Riley's face had blood still dripping from the wound. Luckily, it wasn't something too serious for Margaret's healing ability. She did the same for Riley, and soon, Riley's flesh on his face grew back and he looked the same as before. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you too, Sherry, Riley said while trying to brush his long blue hair. But his hair hadn't grown back, and he pretended to brush the air instead. Sherry was also crucial to them being able to beat the Shadow Lotus. If she hadn't been with them in the broadcast center, they might not have made it out alive. Sherry stood up and turned to the governor and Peter Lim. Their mission was to capture them in the first place. The governor and Peter Lim quickly raised their hands in the air. After witnessing what Riley and the others could do, they weren't dumb enough to try and get away. Get them cuffed up. The leader will be interrogating them himself. Sherry showed her ID to the commander of the soldiers at the checkpoint. The commander looked at it and nearly dropped the ID. He would have never ever dreamed of meeting someone close to the leader. But here she was right in front of him in person. Cuff them up and don't let them get away. The commander glanced at his soldiers and gave them the order. They quickly did as they were instructed. One of them took out handcuffs from the checkpoint counter and put them on the governor and Peter Lim's wrists. Reinforcements from the Central Battle Administration area will be arriving soon, Sherry said. The West Battle Administration area was now in disarray, and the order would need to be restored as soon as possible. The commander and the soldiers gave out a sigh of relief. They were glad that it would be over soon. Lucas and the other teammates also felt a sense of relief. He wanted to walk over to Sheba to pat it for the job well done, but he felt the ground shake. Chapter 136. Holding On. Underground in the sewers. The cult members looked anxiously at what they had done. The walls that blocked out demonic beasts from the underground tunnels were now collapsed. They had blown them apart with explosives the Divine One gave them. May our saviors come to salvage us. Some of them started chanting as water started seeping through the debris raining down onto them. Everything was now going as the Divine One had said, increasing their blind faith in the Divine One. Crack. Rocks and dirt started falling down from the debris. And in the next moment, an explosion ensued, creating an opening in the debris. Water rushed in, flooding the tunnel the cult members of the Divine Flame cult were in. May our saviors. Their chanting stopped and they gasped for air as the water flooded over their heads. The chills from the water made it difficult for them to swim. Dark shadows rushed in from the opening. The eyes of the cult members opened wide when they saw clearly what these dark shadows were. They were their saviors. However, before they could do anything, their saviors grabbed onto them with their scaly hands. The demonic beasts opened their mouths and took a bite of the cult members. Pain caused the cult members to twitch their bodies, but they didn't resist. They believed that they would now be going to heaven after being devoured by the demonic beasts. The Divine One would join them soon. Lucas frowned at what had happened earlier. He glanced over to the commander and asked, "Anything unusual happen earlier? Other than your arrival, there was another group of men that came here in a truck." The commander shrugged his shoulders and said, "One of them opened a container that had a white glow in it. The white glow then shot out flames at us. Fortunately, they didn't do much damage, and we took care of them rather quickly. White glow. Flames. Lucas said as he pondered. It didn't take him long to realize who they were. The Divine Flame Cult. But what are they up to this time? He said and glanced at the others. They shook their heads, being clueless about what they wanted. Did the Divine Flame Cult work with Shadow Lotus this time? Lucas thought. He quickly shook his head. If they were working together, they would have had to fight Shadow Lotus and Divine Flame Cult at the same time. But that wasn't the case. There was only one possible answer left. After all, the Divine Flame Cult wasn't too shy about what they wanted. Get ready. They must have been working with the demonic beasts. Lucas shouted. Working with demonic beasts? But how? Rex couldn't believe what Lucas had said. The demonic beasts he knew were all bloodlusting animals. You couldn't even talk and reason with them. How was it possible to work with these savages? Growl. Lucas was, however, right. Around 30 demonic beasts with heads that looked like reptiles and bodies with scales and webbed limbs appeared. Their mouths opened and thick goo of saliva dripped onto the ground when they saw Lucas and the others. Open fire! The commander of the checkpoint shouted. Bang! Flashes of amber brightened the surroundings as the soldiers opened fire immediately. Whiz! Bullets hit the scaly skin of the demonic beasts and skimmed off. It wasn't enough to do any damage. Lucas used his gravity ability to make himself have 3 times less gravity, and he ascended into the air. Flickers of lightning appeared in his hands. The reptilian demonic beasts tilted their heads at Lucas. Wham! He unleashed his lightning strikes at the reptilian demonic beasts down below. They tried to open their mouths and shoot out balls of water at him but weren't fast enough. Bladder. The lightning strikes hit them, ripping through their scaly skins. 3 of the reptilian demonic beasts exploded into pieces. As their bodies lay on the ground, smoke rose from the flesh, giving out a putrid charred smell into the air. Boom! Lucas increased his gravity, and he shot down to the ground towards the remaining demonic beasts. He landed on one of them, squashing it into a mangled mass of flesh. The other reptilian demonic beasts opened their mouths and shot out balls of water at him. Crack! An ice wall rose from the ground surrounding Lucas. The balls of water weren't powerful enough to get through the ice wall, causing only cracks like spider webs on it. Plop! The next moment, the reptilian demonic beasts fell flat onto the ground. Lucas had used his gravity ability and made the surroundings have 3 times the gravity, taking the reptilian demonic beasts by surprise. With them on the ground, Lucas raised his hands and flagged them down. Ice spikes came down from the air, striking through a few of the demonic beasts. Lucas charged through the ice wall and went head-on with the other reptilian demonic beasts. The reptilian demonic beasts tried to retaliate but couldn't. Their bodies struggled to move with the 3 times gravity affecting them. Lucas pulled back his arms and then punched at the reptilian demonic beasts in front of him. The punch broke the air, giving out a loud boom and an airwave shot at the head of the reptilian demonic beasts. Bladder. The airwave ripped through the head, and it exploded, splattering the flesh and white matter all over the surroundings. He went on and rampaged through the remaining reptilian demonic beasts. The commander and soldiers looked at him from the checkpoint with fear in their hearts. Lucas was now drenched in the blood of the demonic beasts. He was covered from head to toe in a smudge of red blood. A familiar sound erupted in his mind as he stood on alert. Ding! Slaughter points plus 6,000. Current slaughter points, 6,600/40,000. Host level, 6. Current abilities, 6. Lucas saw the slaughter points and it confirmed his thoughts. These were low-tiered demonic beasts. Most likely they were the vanguard to what would be coming next. Lucas knew that he and the others had to hold out before the reinforcements from the Central Battle Administration area arrived. He did it. They are all gone. One of the soldiers started cheering. The others followed suit. They had never seen someone taking down demonic beasts so easily. Their cheers were, however, short-lived. The ground started to shake again. Chapter 137. Tentacles galore. Hordes of reptilian demonic beasts appeared from the manhole and an opening in the ground. Water gushed out from the opening, creating a small shower falling onto Lucas and the others. "Lucas, watch out above you!" Riley shouted and raised his hands, pointing them to the sky. There were demonic beasts as large as a car that had lunged into the air. They looked like octopi with tentacles that were engulfed in a blue glow. Wham! Riley unleashed a lightning strike onto one of the octopi. A thick ice wall appeared in front of the octopus, blocking Riley's lightning strike. The soldiers also opened fire upon the octopi, but their bullets were of no use. The ice wall that the octopi conjured in front of them protected them from the bullets. Meanwhile, Lucas, after being warned by Riley, ascended into the air. Wham! He unleashed his lightning strikes at the octopi that were nearest to him. The lightning strikes hit the ice wall of the octopi, creating a huge dent in the ice wall. Lucas then pulled back his arm and hurled a punch at one of the octopi. Thud! His punch broke the air, giving out a loud boom and an airwave shot at the octopus. The airwave penetrated through the ice wall, continued its trajectory towards the octopus's body, and ripped through the flesh. The other octopi lashed out their tentacles at Lucas, trying to grab onto him. But all of them dropped to the ground immediately. Lucas activated his gravity ability and made the surrounding gravity 3 times more than normal. Plop! When he descended onto the ground, he used his Shadow Wielder ability to pull one of the octopi towards him. As the octopus got near enough, Lucas gave a left hook to one of the octopi. His punch ripped through the huge head of the octopus, causing half of it to explode into pieces. Squirt! The other octopi blew out a cloud of dark ink towards Lucas. Not knowing what it could do, Lucas quickly leaped far away with his gravity ability. Sizzle! Some of the reptilian demonic beasts were caught by the dark ink, and the parts where they were in contact started to bubble. The bubbles grew bigger and bigger, but they didn't stop. Bladder! Finally, the bubbles got big enough until they exploded. Flesh and blood were then splattered all over the surroundings. Seeing this, Lucas placed his hands on the ground. An ice wall rose from the ground, encircling where the octopi were. The octopi tried to get away, but they struggled to do so under 3 times the gravity. Lucas then ascended into the air again. This time, he got above the area near to where the octopi were. Flickers of light appeared in his hands. Wham! Lightning after lightning, Lucas unleashed all he had onto the octopi. The soldiers' hearts thumped with every lightning strike Lucas unleashed. Never in their lives had they seen someone who could deal out so many lightning strikes at once. Amidst the splattering of flesh and blood onto the ice wall, the soldiers felt the courage to fight like Lucas. One of them took out an RPG and aimed it at the reptilian demonic beasts coming towards his team. Boom! The RPG shot at the reptilian demonic beasts, causing an explosion. The reptilian demonic beasts were turned into pieces by the RPG. This boosted the morale of the soldiers. More of them took out heavier arms and started to fire upon the reptilian demonic beasts. A huge ice spike, 30 feet in diameter, appeared in the air above where the octopi were. It got bigger and bigger as Lucas accumulated his energy onto it. Finally, he felt it was big enough and he flagged down his hand. Whoosh! The ice spike shot down onto the octopi. The gravity made the velocity of the ice spike even faster, and soon it flew towards the octopi like a white shimmer of light. Boom! The ice spike hit the octopi. It crushed the octopi that were in its path and shattered into smaller sharp shards of ice. The shards of ice shot at the octopi in the surroundings. Soon, what was within the ice wall created by Lucas were the dead bodies of these octopi. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 8,000. Current slaughter points 14600/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 6. Each of these octopi was worth 400 slaughter points. Most likely mid-tiered demonic beasts, Lucas thought. With the octopi taken care of, he turned his focus to the reptilian demonic beasts. Arg! Don't mind me. Shoot at it. One of the soldiers got grabbed by a reptilian demonic beast. The other soldiers hesitated for a moment. It was too late, as the soldier being grabbed had his head ripped off by the reptilian demonic beast. Years of being slack as soldiers had deteriorated their physical qualities. Having a heart of courage wasn't enough. Wham! A lightning strike came at the reptilian demonic beast, and it ripped the reptilian demonic beast apart. Lucas had come to their rescue. He glanced over at Riley and the others. They were trying to fend off the reptilian demonic beasts with whatever energy they had left. Two reptilian demonic beasts who were coming at Riley suddenly found themselves stopping. Lucas had used his shadow wielder ability to grab onto their legs. He jabbed his fist at them, and the airwaves from his punches blew their heads apart. When he was done, Lucas moved on and tried to help Emma. Emma, with her poison, was holding the reptilian demonic beasts back. And with her pistol she aimed and shot at the eyes of the reptilian demonic beasts. She was accurate enough, taking them out and making them blind one by one. But as her poison smoke cleared, the remaining reptilian demonic beasts waited for their chance to pounce on Emma. Rex was anxious as he was beside Emma, lashing out his spiky rock whip rapidly. He gave out a sigh of relief when he saw Lucas coming in at the reptilian demonic beasts. Wham! Lucas unleashed his lightning strikes at the reptilian demonic beasts that were closest to Emma. They hit them and they exploded into pieces instantly. The other reptilian demonic beasts hesitated, and they started to try to get away from Lucas. Lucas placed his hands on the ground, trying to use his ice ability to freeze them. But he felt the ground that he stood on rising. He quickly leaped away and the ground erupted. Lucas. Chapter 138. High-tiered demonic beast. A huge pincer like a crab pincer shot out from the ground and tried to snap at Lucas. Crack. The pincer snapped and made a loud noise. Wind blades shot out from the pincer into the surroundings. Bladder. Emma got caught by a wind blade and it sliced through her thigh. Lucas quickly placed his hands on the ground, and an ice wall rose from the ground. However, more pincers appeared from the ground. One turned and tried to plunge its sharp end at Emma. Crack. The pincer hit the ice wall, penetrating it midway. More of the ground rose near the pincer. Lucas quickly lunged at Emma, grabbing her and leaping away with his gravity ability. Boom! And soon, the ground opened up, causing a loud boom as the demonic beast appeared from the ground. It was like a huge crab with its shell entangled with something that looked like veins. The vein-like tissue throbbed with every moment passing by. The huge demonic crab, as large as a truck, turned itself towards Lucas. It seemed to have identified him as the biggest threat. Take care of her. Lucas handed Emma over to Rex and got ready for battle. Whoosh! The huge demonic crab snapped both its pincers, unleashing a torrent of wind blades into the surroundings. Unlucky soldiers and reptilian demonic beasts nearby were sliced in half by the wind blades. Help! Me! Some of the soldiers tried to crawl with their upper bodies, seeking help. It was futile as the incessant bleeding made them lose consciousness very soon. Wham! Lucas unleashed lightning strikes at the huge demonic crab. The huge demonic crab placed its pincers in front of its body, trying to block the lightning strikes with the pincers. Crack. The lightning strikes hit, causing several cracks on the hard shell of the pincers. The huge demonic crab lifted its body and gave out a roar. Bubbles blew out from the veins covering its body. The bubbles flew in all directions. Soldiers looked at the bubbles curiously, wondering what they were. They didn't have time to react when the bubbles popped. The air ripped through their bodies, creating holes that could be seen from front to back. Blood and flesh of the soldiers were strewn all over the place. Lucas unleashed his lightning strikes at the bubbles, causing them to explode before they could pop with the compressed air inside. Riley, Rex, and Harrianto also did the same with their abilities. The huge demonic crab wanted to snap its pincers again, but Lucas activated his gravity ability. This made the huge demonic crab experience 3 times the normal gravity. This caused the pincers to drop to the ground. Lucas then lunged at the huge demonic crab with his hands pointed at it. Flickers of light appeared in his hands, and when he got near enough, He unleashed his lightning strikes at the huge demonic crab. Crack! The lightning strikes cracked the hard shell of the huge demonic crab. The huge demonic crab knew it had to stop Lucas before his next attack. A bubble appeared in front of its mouth, and it got bigger. The pincers which were on the ground swiped at Lucas. Thud! Lucas used his shadow wielder ability and grabbed the two pincers coming at him. He didn't wait for the bubble to grow any bigger, and he unleashed another wave of lightning strikes at the huge demonic crab. Wham! The lightning strikes hit, and they finally shattered the hard shell of the huge demonic crab. Lucas then threw punches at the huge demonic crab. Boom! His punches shot out airwaves at the huge demonic crab, penetrating deeper and deeper into the soft tissue of the huge demonic crab. Lucas finally stopped when he heard a familiar sound erupt in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 800. Current slaughter points 15400/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 6. He saw the slaughter points and was pleased. The huge demonic crab was a high-tiered demonic beast. With the defeat of the huge demonic beast, everyone cheered for Lucas. He did it again. How is he doing this? Doesn't he feel tired at all? I don't care. He saved our lives. That's all that matters. Some were astonished at his seemingly limitless energy, and some were just grateful for Lucas saving them. What was left were the remaining reptilian demonic beasts. Lucas wanted to summon Sheba to take out these reptilian demonic beasts, but he realized that Sheba was tired after taking in the torrents of lightning strikes from Ashen. He had no choice but to do it himself. With Lucas's help, the soldiers with Riley and the other team members were able to kill all of them. Margaret then attended to Emma and the other team members. "Are the other parts of the city safe?" Lucas asked the commander of the checkpoint. The commander hurriedly picked up his radio and checked. "There are sightings of these demonic beasts all over the city, but we can't muster a proper defense against them after the undead hordes of men and women," the commander said after he got the reply. Lucas frowned and glanced over at Sherry. "How long before reinforcements arrive?" Sherry picked up her phone and made a call. When she was done, she ended the call and said, 10 more minutes. Lucas nodded and handed out energy bars to Riley and the others. He knew he couldn't be going around the city to save everyone. And on top of that, his teammates weren't like him. It would be best for them to secure the wall and wait for the reinforcements to come. Things would be far worse if the wall was breached. Not far away, 4 men carried a sedan on their shoulders. They were bending over from the enormous weight. Flesh bulged out from the openings of the sedan. "Hurry! Our savior isn't pleased, and we need to get rid of the obstacle." The Divine One spoke from the chair in the sedan. The cult members carrying the sedan nodded their heads and they gritted their teeth and hastened their pace. Other cult members in the surroundings started to run towards the direction of the checkpoint. Chapter 139. The Divine One. Boom! There were explosions sounding off all over the city. Pillars of smoke rose into the air. All around Lucas there were moans from the injured soldiers. Healers that had been dispatched were healing those that could be saved. They had to reserve their energy and forgo those that were too far gone. It was a difficult but necessary choice for them to make. Riley and the other team members rested and ate their energy bars, trying to recuperate as much energy as they could within this short respite. Lucas stood where the reptilian demonic beasts came from. The soldiers looked at his back in awe, thinking about how heroic he was, unwavering in the face of death, standing in front of them, ready to take on whatever was coming. Unknown to them, he had summoned the information panel in his mind. Ding! Current slaughter points 15400/40,000. Host level 6. Current abilities 6. SSS level physique. Novice 0/3000. SSS level shadow wielder. Novice 0/3000. SSS level summoner. Adept 0/9000. SSS level ice ability. Novice 0/3000. SSS Level Lightning Ability, Adept, 0/9000. SSS Level Gravity Ability, Adept, 0/9000. He had enough slaughter points now to upgrade his remaining 3 abilities. First, he thought about upgrading his SSS level physique ability. More information about the upgrade appeared in his mind. Improvements in Adept level of Mastery, SSS level physique. Enhanced healing, able to regrow limbs. Upgrade ability, Y/N. Lucas thought yes silently in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host. SSS level physique upgraded to Adept level of Mastery. Next was his SSS level Shadow Wielder ability. Improvements in Adept level of Mastery, SSS Shadow Wielder. Split Shadow into 2. Break off Shadow within 60 feet. Upgrade ability, Y/N. He thought yes silently in his mind again. A rush of knowledge on how to utilize the new ability for the Shadow Wielder ability went into his mind. Finally, it was time to upgrade the SSS level Ice ability. Improvements in Adept level of Mastery, SSS level Ice. Half the time to conjure ice. Twice the thickness and strength for the ice. Unleash small blizzard of ice spikes. Upgrade ability, Y/N. Lucas thought yes silently to himself, and a rush of knowledge came into his mind. When it was all over, he summoned the information panel to check again. Ding! Current slaughter points, 6,400/40,000. Host level, 6. Current abilities, 6. With 6,400 slaughter points left, he would have to gain much more slaughter points to level up or upgrade his abilities. Die, you heretics! May our savior show you the light. Cries from the cult members stopped Lucas's thoughts. They were coming at him with containers in their hands. Their eyes and expressions looked like those of someone who was deranged. Lucas recognized the containers and knew what they could do. He raised one of his hands and flagged it downwards. The temperature dropped immediately. Wind started blowing at the cult members. Around 100 ice spikes appeared above the cult members. Not knowing what had happened, the cult members tried to open the containers they had in their hands. The chill that went into their bones told them that they were in danger. Bladder. It was too late for them as the ice spikes shot down from above, crushing into some of them, and for some they were nailed to the ground from the head. Clonk. Their containers dropped from their hands and rolled along the ground. Incoming! Everyone to their positions! The commander of the checkpoint shouted. The soldiers who were still able to fight picked up their weapons and got behind their covers. Riley and the other team members also came and stood behind Lucas. Rex patted his shoulder and said, "This time try and leave some for us." A huge and fat man sitting in a sedan carried by several cult members appeared in the distance. The man's flesh was bulging out everywhere. The man looked like a pool made of flesh rather than a human being. Boom! The sedan crashed into the ground, and the cult members carrying it also fell flat onto the ground. The Divined One had miraculously leaped out from the sedan and lunged at Lucas. Or maybe not, Rex said when he saw the Divined One shooting towards them like a huge cannonball. Lucas raised his hands, and an ice wall that was 18 feet thick rose from the ground. The Divined One crashed halfway into the ice wall and bounced backwards. If Lucas hadn't upgraded his ice ability, the Divined One might have been able to breach the ice wall. Crash. The Divined One slid across the ground, tearing through the concrete and asphalt. He took in a deep breath and blew out a beam of white flame at Lucas. Crack. The white flame hit the ice wall and melted it. But Lucas had used his gravity ability to reduce his gravity and ascended into the air. Wham! Before the Divined One lifted his head to direct the white flames at Lucas, Lucas unleashed his lightning strikes at the Divined One. Thud! The lightning strikes hit the bulging flesh of the Divined One, causing an explosion. It ruptured through the flesh and the flesh splattered onto the ground. The putrid smell of charred flesh and smoke that rose from the wound filled the air. The damage, however, wasn't much for the Divined One. He lifted his head and swung the beam of white flames upwards towards Lucas. When the white flames came near to Lucas, he felt his head being struck to the side. Thud. Lucas's shadow had separated from his body and punched at the Divine One's tiny head. The beam of white flame veered to the side, and this gave Lucas the opportunity for his next strike. Wind blew at the Divine One, and Lucas flagged his hands down. Hundreds of ice spikes shot down towards the Divine One. Bladder. The ice spikes plunged into the bulging flesh of the Divine One. A goo of red blood mixed with yellow liquid squirted out from the many wounds caused by the ice spikes. Go get him. These cults deserve what's coming for them. Hope they suffer a miserable death. Seeing how Lucas was dominating, the soldiers cheered him on. And many wished for the cult members to die a horrible death. They had been thinking about letting the bloodthirsty demonic beasts into the city ever since the so-called Divine One appeared. Being stuck where he was by the ice spikes, the Divine One gave out a loud roar. Chapter 140 Hand-to-Hand Combat. Roar. The roar of the Divine One was unusually loud, catching Lucas off guard, and for a moment he lost his consciousness. Plop. Lucas descended to the ground, crushing the cult members that were trying to get to him. The cult members then swarmed around him, trying to take him out. Rex lashed his spiky rock whip at them, ripping their bodies into halves. Haryanto shot out plasma pulses at the cult members. Emma and Riley also did what they could with their poison and lightning abilities to stop the cult members. Wham! A flash of lightning broke through the hordes of cult members from where Lucas was. Riley and the other team members gave out a sigh of relief when they saw that. Meanwhile, blood and yellow liquid spurted out from the Divine One's body even faster. The ice spikes melted and disappeared as if the blood and yellow liquid were hot piping steam. His body was now like a deflated balloon with huge flaps of skin on the ground. A yellow glow appeared and engulfed his body next. Miraculously, the flaps of skin on the ground started to shrink. The flaps of skin slowly shrank enough to wrap around the limbs and body of the Divine One. Finally, when it was over, the Divine One now looked different. His body was now muscular and lean like a bodybuilder. The Divine One with his green eyes focused and stared at Lucas. He knew now that Lucas was the one that was stopping his master's troops from entering the city and destroying the wall. The Divine One bent his knees and kicked hard onto the ground. Boom! The ground exploded from the Divine One's leap towards Lucas. His body blurred, moving so fast that only the afterimage shimmered in the air. Lucas quickly activated his gravity ability, and the gravity in his surroundings was 3 times more. It slowed down the velocity of the Divine One significantly. The Divine One dropped onto the ground and slid towards Lucas. Lucas saw the Divine One pull back his arm, ready to punch at his face. He then used his Shadow Wielder ability to separate his shadow into 2. Each of the shadows then moved and grabbed onto the left and right arms of the Divine One. The Divine One was shocked for a moment as he struggled to break free from Lucas's shadows. A yellow glow engulfed his body again. Whoosh! With the yellow glow, the Divine One broke free from Lucas's shadows and he lunged towards Lucas. Lucas was ready for him with his hands pointed at the Divine One. Wham! A bright flash brightened up the surroundings as he unleashed the lightning strike at the Divine One. But when the lightning strikes hit the yellow glow, they were reflected away from the Divine One. Thud! Lucas saw the fist of the Divine One coming at him, and he crossed his arms in front of his body. The Divine One's punch crushed through the forearm of Lucas and stopped. Lucas had retaliated and leaped with his knee to hit the Divine One's chin. Thud! His knee strike hit, and the Divine One's head flung backwards, exposing his throat. Lucas then tried to unleash an ice spike at the throat. Crack! Upon hitting the yellow glow, the ice spike deflected away and shot into the ground. Lucas figured that the yellow glow was able to deflect all forms of projectiles and such abilities. The only way for him to defeat the Divine One might be hand-to-hand combat. With this thought, Lucas used his hands to try and grab onto the Divine One's throat. But the Divine One raised his leg and gave Lucas a frontal kick. Crack! It hit his chest, breaking a few of his ribcage bones. Lucas ignored the pain and with his shadows grabbed onto the Divined One's neck with his shadows instead. Boom! Lucas pulled back his arm and punched at the Divined One. His fist pounded onto the throat of the Divined One, and he could hear something crack before he saw the arms of the Divined One swing at his head. Lucas bent his knees, ducking down and dodging the Divined One's arms. He then kicked hard onto the ground and with his head, hit the Divined One's chin again. This time, it cracked the Divined One's chin. Ha! Think you can defeat him by losing weight? Look at you now. Go! Kill this bastard. The soldiers cheered again, venting out their anger at the Divined One. Lucas wasn't distracted by them and focused on the task at hand. He saw the head of the Divined One go limp and sway to the left and right. A clear sign that the Divined One must have lost consciousness. He grabbed onto the head of the Divined One with his left hand, pulled back his right arm, ready to punch right through the Divined One's head. However, the ground shook violently like an earthquake. More than a dozen pincers popped out from the ground. The pincers snapped together, unleashing a torrent of wind blades at Lucas and the others. Lucas leaped backwards and placed his hands onto the ground. An ice wall rose from the ground and blocked the wind blades coming at Riley and the others. Crack! Shards of ice cracked as the wind blades hit them. The ice wall stood when the volley of wind blades was over. The soldiers, however, weren't as lucky. Some of them got caught and were sliced into pieces by the wind blades. Roar! The Divined One gave out a roar and broke free from Lucas's shadows. He walked back to where the huge demonic crabs were coming out from the ground. The huge demonic crabs quickly swarmed around him. The Divined One stood on the back of one. His flesh on his feet started to melt and his body got into the back of the huge demonic crab. The other huge demonic crabs started to snap their pincers together excitedly. Whoosh! Wind blades came shooting towards the ice wall again. Lucas got ready as he heard the ice wall cracking as the wind blades hit it. Boom! The Divined One with his crab body leaped into the air towards Lucas.